Hi everyone, welcome to Demystifying the Metaphysical, a channel to help you better understand yourself and others, and perhaps bringing a bit more compassion into your life. Today we're going to discuss what your fingers say about you. We're going to discover what additional information we can learn about a person's characteristics through their fingers, and whether the new information confirms or counters what their hand shape tells us, something we discussed in last week's video. I've put a card here on the top right to that video, or you can find the link in the video description below. When we find multiple signs that tell us the same thing, the attribute is more likely to be true. There is a wealth of information to uncover from your fingers. So I'm going to split this discussion into two parts. Today, we're going to be looking at whether your fingers are smooth or knotty, the shape of your fingertips, the set of your fingers, and the characteristics of the index finger. Let's first figure out if you have smooth or knotty fingers and what it means for you. Take a look at the joints on your fingers. Are they smooth like the hand on the left, where their finger outline is straight and the joints are barely noticeable? Or do the knuckles bulge out like the hand on the right? There are two places to look for knotty joints. Take a look at where the yellow arrows are pointing in the hand on the right. This is the top joint. It's called the knot of mental order. And the middle knot is where the red arrows are pointing, and this is called the knot of material order. In this hand, only the middle joints are developed, which means the person most likely prefers an orderly living environment. People with well-developed top and middle joints are sometimes said to have philosophical hands because they have a systemic and orderly mind. Something to keep in mind is that the top joint is naturally smaller than the bottom joint. So the key is to look at how the knuckle fits in with the rest of the finger. Now let's take a look at what smooth finger people are like. People with smooth fingers share the same qualities as that of short finger people. Check out the video from last week on how to determine if your fingers are short or long. Smooth finger people are ruled by their heart. Feelings and emotions can take precedence over reason. They're receptive to external stimulus and information. They go with their instinct, intuition, and gut feeling when making decisions. They don't doubt, as they take much for granted, which can cause them to overlook small details. If the fingers are short, the person could be impulsive, while having long fingers could counter the impulsive nature of smooth joints. Knotty finger people, on the other hand, think carefully before taking action. They have characteristics similar to long finger people. They may seem slow and deliberate, but their minds are constantly evaluating the pros and cons of a situation. People with well-developed top and bottom joints tend to have excellent memory. Their mind is a highly refined filing system with excellent cross-referencing capabilities. And often, once they've made up their minds about something, it's not easy for them to change it. If a person has knotty joints and long fingers, this is likely to make them mull over something for ages before taking action. If only the bottom joints are developed, they probably not only like things to be tidy in their environment, but also probably like to be neat in their appearance. Here's an example of a hand with extremely well-developed material knots, especially on the middle finger. Now, for some of you, you may have noticed that your knuckles have become more developed over time. Some say that this is because a person has become more analytical as they mature. Let me know in the comments if that resonates with you. Now let's find out what kind of fingertips you have. Before we move on, take a closer look at the fingertip on this hand. Notice how the tips of the fingers are well padded, and the padding starts to taper as it gets closer to the first joint. These are called spatulate fingertips. Let's find out what other fingertip types there are. There are 4 types of fingertips: the spatulate, conic, square, and pointed fingertips. Spatulate fingertips broaden at the tip. Conic fingertips are rounded, while squared fingertips are leveled. And pointed fingertips are rounded but much more tapered than conic fingertips. Not all your fingertips have to be of one type. In fact, most people have more than one type of fingertip, making them more versatile, adaptable, and often having a wide range of interests. Even if a person has more than one type of fingertip, they will most likely have one type that dominates. As we'll see later, the fingertips are the key to interpreting the characteristics of each finger. Let's start with the spatulate tip. At first, it might seem hard to tell the difference between a spatulate and a square tip. The spatulate tip is much more exaggerated. It has the broadest tip of the 4 types. If you have a spatulate tip, you most likely are independent, energetic, original, innovative, practical, and intelligent, creative, and often charismatic. You probably don't mind and even might enjoy change, as you tend to be very enthusiastic about new and different ways of doing things. You may also be into sports and enjoy being on the move. And you probably are not that concerned with what others think of you. Now let's take a look at the square tip. Some square tips are very distinct in appearance with precise edges. I've never seen this before, but let me know in the comments if you have tips like these. The more common square tips have softer, slightly rounded edges. If your fingertips are square-shaped, you're down to earth, capable, extremely practical, cautious, conservative, and methodical. Now, while spatula-tipped finger people are filled with unconventional creative ideas, square-tip people invent systems and structures. You probably prefer routine. Some of you might wake up and go to bed at the same time every day because regularity makes you feel secure. You tend to be ruled by the mind and not the heart. Using logic and reason is the way you process information. Conic tips have an oval, rounded fingertip. The more tapered the tip, the more pronounced the conic traits will be. If you have conic fingertips, you're easygoing, sensitive, quick thinking, romantic, highly intuitive, and idealistic. These people want beauty, but order isn't a priority for them. They are emotional and sympathetic. They're ruled by their heart rather than their head. And here we have the pointed tips. The characteristics of pointed tip people are similar to that of conic tips, but the characteristics are usually more extreme. They are intuitive, inspirational, impressionable, highly creative, spiritual, and daydreamers. Some people have unique gifts like having the ability to connect with other planes of existence. A lot of psychics and clairvoyants have pointed fingertips. Before we take a look at the setting of the fingers, let's take a look at sensitivity pads on the fingertips and how to tell if you have them. Have you ever noticed these droplet-looking pads on your fingertips? I've only seen these sensitivity pads once. They're supposed to mean that the person is extremely sensitive, highly intuitive, caring, and supportive with great love of all living things. Let me know in the comments if you have these or know of someone who have these sensitivity pads. Now let's take a look at the setting of your fingers and what it means. To figure out how your fingers are set, look at where your fingers connect to your palm and draw an imaginary line across to see whether the line is straight, as shown by the green line on the first hand, an arch, the blue line on the second hand, or neither, in which case most likely you have uneven set fingers. Notice how the uneven set hand in the picture on the far right has a low set pinky while all the other fingers are evenly set. Evenly set fingers are not common. They are a sign of confidence, good sense, and positive attitude. Having an arch set suggests a well-balanced, easygoing personality, someone who does not consider themselves superior or inferior to others. Uneven set fingers are quite common. My fingers are unevenly set. The uneven set is the result of either one or more than one fingers being set higher or lower than normal on the palm. Something we'll have to pay attention to when assessing the finger length in the next section. In this hand, all the fingers are evenly set except for the little finger. A low set little finger could mean that the person could use a boost of confidence. But in this case, because the hand has a strong index finger, it counters the potential lack of confidence. Before we get into how I was able to tell that the index finger is strong, we first need to learn the official names of each finger. In the world of hand reading, the thumb is considered the most important, and it is in a category of its own, and not considered a finger. Maybe that's why it wasn't named after a Greek god, though you would think that if it was so important, it would be named after a god, but who knows. Starting with the index finger, this finger was named after Jupiter. It represents leadership. The middle finger is named after Saturn, and it's associated with responsibility. The ring finger is named after Apollo, and it represents creativity. And finally, the little finger is named after Mercury. It tells us about our communication abilities. The thumb tells us about a person's will, logic, and emotion. As we go through in detail each of the characteristics of the fingers, something to keep in mind is that if the fingers bend laterally like this, it usually increases the shrewdness of the qualities of that finger. The fingers here are bent laterally from the middle joint where the red arrows are pointing, but they can also bend laterally from the top joint. And if the finger leans towards another finger like this, then the finger that is leaning gives up some of its strength to the finger that it's leaning towards. In this hand, the Jupiter finger is leaning towards Saturn. Note that the lean is not the result of a lateral bend in the knuckle, as both fingers are straight in this hand. Now let's take a closer look at the characteristics of the Jupiter finger. The Jupiter finger represents leadership, ambition, independence, and confidence. It represents how you see yourself in the world. The finger is considered to be of normal length if it reaches halfway up the top joint of the middle finger, shown by the red line. If the index finger reaches above the line, it is considered to be long, and if the index finger doesn't reach the line, then it is considered short. The set of the finger on this hand is even, but if the index finger is set low or high on the palm, we would have to take this into consideration when determining the length. It's also best when this finger is roughly the same length as your ring finger, as it means that you're confident about your abilities and happy with the way you are. If the index finger is noticeably long, the person likes being in control, and others may find them a bit bossy. The person will be self-motivated and have a strong desire for success, which is a great quality to have. But many people with this trait can push themselves too hard. If the index finger is noticeably short, the person might be shy or lack confidence, as they may be inclined to hold back rather than push forward. They may find it hard to stand up for themselves. The upside is that this person will know when to pause and relax, and when to push forward. Now let's see how personality changes depending on the type of fingertip you have on the Jupiter finger. A conic tip on this finger will produce an idealistic and intuitive person with strong spiritual tendencies. Conic tips soften a person's ambition, making the person more sentimental and easy to get along with. A pointed fingertip often takes away from the leadership qualities, but heightens the spiritual consciousness. A square tip will add a lot of common sense. Square tips are considered the best for business success. A spatulate tip means originality, allowing the person to find new ways of becoming more successful. Stay tuned for the second part of what your finger says about you. Make sure to hit the subscribe button so that you'll get notified when part 2 comes out. It's been a pleasure. See you in the next video.